Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear friends and colleagues, good evening and welcome to the opening session of the conference, of the international conference, Defending Democracy, Battlefield of Truth. Today we will have a great number of speakers, starting with our friends and colleagues here in person and also online. This conference is live streamed and will be in English language. Without further ado, I would like to thank you all, both our distinguished guests online on our Zoom link and also our guests and co-hosts here with me tonight, and also the ladies and gentlemen in the hall, in the conference hall here in Skopje. What we did in the last 10 months since December conference in 2024, the international conference also held in Skopje, after which we established the Defending Democracy Global Initiative, and afterwards the Westminster Alliance for Ukraine, a flagship program of the Defending Democracy Global Initiative, and many other activities and actions that we organized or participated in across Europe is mildly put very good, very successful, and very influential and impactful. However, a long road is ahead of us. Today we want to hear from our speakers. What lessons have we learned from everything that happened in the past several years, especially in the past 10 months, and what we need to do? What is the way ahead? I'm very glad to bring to you Mr. Roger Casale, the head of the Westminster Alliance for Ukraine, and Dr. Wolfgang Ressmann, the head of New European People's Forum and the Media Dialogue from Germany. First of all, thank you very much, Mr. Casale, for being with us. And what would you say, what lessons have we learned in the past 10 months with the Westminster Alliance for Ukraine?
Well, thank you very much indeed, Javier. And let me start by adding my thanks to our very distinguished guests who are joining us online, to all of you here in the room in Skopje, in North Macedonia. Thank you for coming to join us here at the Hotel Continental in Skopje, Macedonia this evening, and to all our audience watching around Europe and internationally at home. And it is remarkable the progress that we've been able to make, as you've said, with the Westminster Alliance for Ukraine after our conference in Skopje last December. And we've, of course, since then had conferences in London on the 13th of May at the House of Commons that was supported by Alex Sobel, the Labour MP and chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group in the House of Commons on Ukraine, and by Lord James Arbuthnot, who is Conservative, Alex is Labour, from the House of Lords and a former Conservative Defence Minister and Chairman of the Defence Select Committee. And of course, last week we were in Rome together with you, Javier, and with the help of Emanuele Errichiello, who will be speaking to us later this evening, from the Centro, Studi, Internazionali, our Italian partners, for a conference in Rome where we had the contributions from think tanks and many others, but crucially from Senator Filippo Sensi, who is a senator from the centre-left, and Emanuele Lopefido, who is an MP from the lower house, the Chamber of Deputies, and from the Foreign Affairs Committee in the Italian Parliament as well. Because just to remind our audience and all of you here in Skopje and also those watching at home, the Westminster Alliance for Ukraine is primarily a network of networks, actually. A network primarily of parliamentarians from the E5 countries, that's Britain, France, Germany, Italy and Poland, those countries within the coalition of the willing, the coalition of 31 countries that was set up by Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer and President Emmanuel Macron in January to support Ukraine now and in the future, and in particular to step up the economic and security, in particular military and security capability and capacities, but also, as we'll be hearing later on, there needs to be other dimensions to that support as well, including a cultural dimension, which we'll be hearing about. But we're also we're also a network of journalists, and we had an event in Karpax at the Economic Forum in Poland, where we focused on media freedom in Eastern and Central Europe, and we will be having events over the coming months in France with our partners, the Jean Monnet Association, and also in Germany. And I think one of the most powerful impacts of our initiative so far are indeed, Jabir, as you've just asked me to comment on the lessons learned, because I think all of us, many of us in this room, certainly you, Jabir, many of our speakers this evening, and Dr. Wolfgang Ressmann next to us, have been with Ukraine right from the days of Maidan and before Olivier, Védrine, who we're going to hear from, was actually on the Maidan 2014. And we've been engaged with this issue and supporting Ukraine for a long time. But what strikes me about the engagement that I've had with Westminster Alliance for Ukraine is that I'm constantly learning new things and new insights. And so I just very briefly, in a couple of minutes, I just want to outline some of the lessons that learned as I see it from the conference that we've done. I think the most important lesson is that all of us at this conference today, we know the danger from Russia. We know the danger in Ukraine and the danger to Europe. We don't need to be woken up to the danger of Russia, to Ukraine, and to the future of Europe. But I think one of the lessons learned is that our societies do. Our societies, our publics are not aware of how grave and how serious and how imminent the danger is. And so, and in fact, also many MPs, many people in Parliament. And so part of our job, I think, is to try and wake people up to the reality of this threat and to what we can, each of us, do. None of us must think that any contribution of any expression of solidarity for Ukraine is too small. It means so much to the people of Ukraine. I often say to friends in Ukraine, well, we wish we could do more. And they say, no, what you're doing means so much to us. The smallest gesture of solidarity means so much. And we try to do much more than that, of course. But even the smallest gesture of solidarity means a great deal. The second lesson, I think, is we must understand that the war in Ukraine doesn't stop at the borders of Ukraine. This is hybrid warfare. That means the borders of Ukraine are porous, and the type of warfare that experiencing the cyber attacks go well beyond the borders of Ukraine and into our societies here. The attempts to manipulate through social media and through other means what is in the minds and hearts of all of us, not just those of us in Ukraine, is very systematic and very pervasive and very damaging. And so this is a hybrid war, and we need to understand that the war has started. The war is already here. That hybrid aspect is here already. I think a third lesson learned is that we need to inject a sense of urgency. Now, I don't think I want to say that we're going to find ourselves in Western Europe in a war with Russia tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, but we have to take the threat seriously, and we have to prepare. We have to prepare for that, and we are not prepared, and we don't know how much time we have. But we do know that we're not prepared, and we need to inject a sense of urgency into our preparations because we are not ready. And I think the fourth lesson is we shouldn't leave it just to governments. It's very good that Sir Keir Starmer and Emanuele Macron and 31 countries have come together in the coalition of the willing. But there's an enormous gap between the ambitions that they set out and the actual practical reality of the situation. And I think part of the work that we can do in Westminster Alliance is to focus on the practical work that needs to be done to actually make a reality of the ambition of the coalition of the willing. One of the things will be to step up defence spending in Europe. And as we heard from the German Minister for European Affairs, Günther Kirchbaum, who we were with on Friday in Rome, Germany, one of the countries of the E5, has had 3 years of recession. How are we going to get European publics in Germany and elsewhere to accept that we need to spend more money on defence when they want more money spent on public services like education and health? We need to cooperate. Emanuele from the conference we had last week said this is absolutely, none of us can do this on our own. There is a strong need to cooperate. And I think the sixth lesson, and this is, I think, something that I really want to emphasize, is it's not just about supporting Ukraine, it's also about learning from Ukraine. Yeah? How is it possible that a country like Ukraine, that was in the situation it was in 3 years ago, has been able to survive 3 years of invasion from Russia? What can we learn from the experience of Ukraine and the Ukrainian people from that about human resilience, apart from anything else? That we have so much to learn from the experience of Ukraine, and we're going to need that. We're going to need that in Europe for when the threat comes to us. And as I've just said, in many ways, it's already there. And I think we also have learnt about the depths of emotional and psychological trauma in the population of Ukraine and how that needs to be addressed as well. The coalition of the willing is about not just about standing up to Russia now and making sure that Ukraine that Ukraine does not fall. It's also about the reconstruction of Ukraine and the future of Ukraine. And the future, when we're talking about the future of Ukraine, we're talking about the future of Ukrainian people. And we need to recognize the level of trauma and psychological damage and stress in the people of Ukraine, and that is going to need to be addressed. And the First Lady of Ukraine spoke very powerfully about that at the Ukraine Recovery Conference, and we were able to engage with that through Alex Sobel, who was attending, and I was at the ambassador's reception on the eve of it, about the need to, if we want to build Ukraine, we need to rebuild the Ukrainian people, and I think that needs to be a focus of our work. And, you know, this is also, we've also learned that this is my lesson number 8, that we need to understand that the future of Ukraine, we can start to see the contours of the future of Ukraine now. If we think about the Second World War and the post-war settlement, that didn't arrive after the Second World War had ended. That was in preparation during the Second World War. And the new Ukraine is being prepared, even as people stand and give up their lives and livelihoods in standing up to the Russian aggression and the Russian invasion. And we can be part of that conversation, and we need to be part of that conversation. And my lesson number 9 is that we have to believe in ourselves. We have to believe that we are strong enough if we stand together to stand up to the Russian invasion, the Russian attack. And we need to remember that, as I said at the beginning, that President Putin isn't just interested in taking over the territory of Ukraine. He wants to erase the love of freedom and democracy in the hearts of the Ukrainian people. And if he got the chance, he would erase it from our hearts as well. And so this is really very much a fight, not just for territory, but also for our identity and our values. And these are values, and this is an identity that I think is very widely shared, not just in Ukraine. And that's my lesson number 9. And that brings me to my lesson number 10, that I don't think we can, one of the things that we have learned from the activities so far of the Westminster Alliance for Ukraine, as you can see, it's a lot, and I could go on, but I don't have time, so I've limited myself to 10 lessons. The future of Ukraine is the future of Europe. If we lose the fight for the future of Ukraine, we lose the fight for the future of Europe. And as I've said, you know, it's a hybrid warfare. It's not just something that stops at the borders of Ukraine. And we've seen this recently in Moldova, the attempt by the Russians to interfere in the election in Moldova. But we've also seen that in Moldova, if we do stand together, if we do believe in ourselves, if we do affirm and assert our right to be free and to defend our democracy, we cannot stand up to this kind of hybrid warfare. And that was not the result that Putin wanted from the election in Moldova. And I think that brings me nicely to our next speaker, my colleague, Dr. Wolfgang Ressmann, from the chair of the European People's Forum and Media Dialogue, to say something to us about that aspect, and in particular, as we're here in the Balkans, how the hybrid warfare is affecting us here. Thank you very much indeed, Wolfgang.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Roger, for your 10 points which we learned in our engagement for Ukraine. I can add some more with my experience. First, I want to introduce myself. My name is Wolfgang Ressmann. I'm coming from Germany. I'm chairman of the New European People's Forum and also an organization called Youth for Media. We are running Erasmus Plus projects in media literacy and practical work with young people and youth workers. This is one point, but the other point concerning with Ukraine, we are running since 10 years a project called Media Dialogue. Media Dialogue was started shortly after Maidan in 2015, and the idea was to bring together journalists, students of journalism, scientists and NGOs to support first Ukraine's fight for a new society after the Maidan revolution, and bringing the information how a media system could work, how we can help each other in building a new Ukraine built on principles of European values, of freedom of press, freedom of speech, and all the things. We thought that now the time was coming for this values, and the idea was also to bring other former Soviet republics in this network, and so the Belarusian Journalist Association joined us. And a year later, also Georgia and Armenia. In Armenia, a group of artists, and in Georgia, Caucasus University and some NGOs. And last but not least, in this project, Moldova is the next partner of Media Dialogue. And we were rather optimistic that democratic development, step by step, perhaps one day together with Russia could work, and that the form of a dialogue is the best form for developing European values. This was the point. So, and then several things happened in 2015, not only in the Corona situation. We had in 2020 the big demonstrations against Lukashenko's regime, the Stone election. You remember perhaps the big demonstrations in Belarus. And one of the results was that our friends from Belarusian had to leave the country. They are meanwhile, the whole journalist organization is meanwhile in exile, living between Poland and the Baltic states, thrown out of the country, or even were in prison. I want to tell you one example that shows what it means, concretely means for humans to live under this influence of Putin ideas. A young journalist, 20 years old, I know her, we just were in contact. She made only photos and videos from the demonstration. She was picked up from a coiffeur, just making her hair, put in a room with 20 other women, 20 square meters, only one can sleep, for around about 30 days. All of the women had corona. No sleep possible. Only little food was possible. And after this cruel and 30 days, Lukashenko regime said, "Okay, you have 3 hours for psychological help, and then you can restart your life in Belarus again." She is also, meanwhile, naturally in exile. But that means concrete repression and I think even torture from a state under control of Russia in Belarus. And the things are going on. Last week we have been in Georgia, and we wanted to start our project working together with students of Caucasus University and making and arranging, organizing media work, concrete media trainings. One of the Belarusian journalists were with us in the front. Some weeks before, the Belarusians said, "We are afraid to go to Georgia. We don't know what could happen. Perhaps they send us to Russia." and then from Russia to Belarus. So at the end of all, we couldn't make our project in Georgia. We have been there for 2 days because of a permission would have been needed by the Georgian government that we can make a media training with students we have done for 15 years also with media literacy and Erasmus project with this university. We got no permission, but we met some journalists. And they told us in Tbilisi, no, we are sitting here in the morning talking about repression of the government. Perhaps we are arrested in the evening. This is the situation in Georgia at the moment. You all saw in the news the big demonstrations against this so-called Georgian dream, but everything which coming from support, like an event which is happening today here with civil, supported by the German government, is impossible in Georgia at the moment. We made the whole project from Armenia and invited friends from Georgia via Zoom reporting about the situation. That means very concretely what's going on when we don't stop this war in Ukraine and we don't support Ukraine to defend themselves, the people and the state, as an independent state which has the right to go its own way in a European future. If we don't support Ukraine, next steps will follow. I had been in, 4 weeks ago in a project in Tallinn, where the just in the days where the Russian jets for 12 minutes were in the airspace of Estonia, and so these threats are all real, and the consequences of these steps we see and we have seen in the Ukrainian war. So when we want to defend our freedom, when we defend our possibilities in all our European countries, not only in the member countries of EU, this is the same in the Balkan region, when we want to be the ones who say this is the development of our countries, we have to throw these Russian ideas out of Europe, to throw it ideological, to give Ukraine the chance to defend themselves in this war, helping them with weapons and all the things they need, also give them the perspectives, like Roger said, to rebuild Ukraine, and on the other side also learning from Ukraine, military as civil. Then we have a future in Europe, but Russian is not our enemy. We don't want to make war against Russia, and no one in Western Europe, no one on the Balkan wants to attack Russia. This is absolutely clear. No one wants Russia to be to lose a war. No one wants that, but we want to protect Ukraine because we want to protect our own values, and we want to live in a society where things like I told in Belarus could not happen, where freedom of press is possible, and where things like we are making today together with North Macedonia, Germany, and the Westminster Alliance for Ukraine is possible, and we can discuss all the issues. Therefore, we fight common with Ukraine and supporting Ukraine. This is my experience about 10 years of media dialogue in the former Eastern Partnership countries. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Ressmann. Indeed, it is a very good lesson learned in most practical terms that you bring to us to this conference, which is extremely valuable contribution to understanding on what is going on, but also, even more importantly, what needs to be done. And obviously this is happening. The story of the Westminster Alliance for Ukraine, as well as the story of the Defending Democracy Global Initiative, is a story of people coming together. And in that sense, we need to mention and to thank our partners, including Jean Monnet Association from France, which is with this program since the beginning and actually is an essential part of what our actions are. Furthermore, Centro Studi Internazionali from Italy is another partner very important with very important contribution to our actions. And that brings me to the next invitation, actually. We've been part of the conference, high-level event in Rome last week. We in organization of Centro Studi Internazionali, and I'm very pleased to see Deputy Director of CSI, Emanuele Errichiello, Mr. Emanuele Errichiello, who I will invite to tell us a bit more about what happened and what's next to be happened. I'm sorry, Emanuele, if I can, just one little remark. I know that it's completely clear, but in order not to have any misunderstanding, from Wolfgang's presentation, we want Russia to lose the war because it's the only precondition to continue the normal life of the continent and of the world in general. Just a little clarification there. Mr. Errichiello, thank you for joining us to this conference, and please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Xabi. Thank you very much, Roger, and thank you very much, Wolfgang. Like, this was extremely great it's great to be here with you, even though online, and really, like, it's my pleasure to make this very brief contribution to this wonderful event, and well done on making it possible. As you already mentioned, I think it's right to start briefly with what happened on Friday, and then, like, I'll make a very brief statement, kind of reiterating already what I've said both in London and in Rome. First of all, let me say that we are really pleased to be partner of this initiative, and thank you very much for bringing us on board. And we were pleased to organize the event that happened on last Friday in Rome, where we had Italian MPs and senators. Specifically, we had good friends of ours, and thanks for mentioning them, Roger and Javier, Emanuele Loperfido and Filippo Sensi, senator and member of the Chamber of Deputy, both working on European and foreign affairs, with Filippo being specifically focusing on human rights and conflicts. Then we had the Director Generals of the Presidency of the Council of Ministers. Specifically, in our case, we had Francesco Tuffarelli, who's currently serving as the highest kind of official level in the Prime Minister's office, dealing with the administrative and European affairs issues, even though he has a long-standing kind of experience with European affairs. And then we had many other experts, think tanks. We had the Istituto Affari Internazionali with us, with Nonna Michelizze. We had Professor Ida Caracciolo, who's a professor at the University in Naples, as well as a judge in the International Court of Justice, and now in International Court for the Law of Sea. And of course, we had Roger and Javier, the main promoters of this initiative and the Westminster Alliance for Ukraine. And we, thanks to them, we also had the pleasure to hear the position of the United Kingdom with the political counselor who was present there. really was a great opportunity to discuss and kind of engage and make a discussion between academia, experts, think tanks, MPs, so parliament, academia, governments happening. It was great also because after that we were invited to closed door round table with the German Minister for European Affairs. And thanks for mentioning it, Roger. And that meeting was important to understand where we stand in terms of European support to Ukraine, and also in terms of understanding what we will do and what the national efforts are in Germany, in the UK, in Italy, in France, in terms of supporting Ukraine, like concrete national efforts, both at the parliamentary and at the government level. So these both were great opportunities to really touch with our hands real world situation and understand the kind of support that it's needed and that we will continue to give. It was our pleasure in that sense to have such an initiative in Rome. Having said that, I want to be really brief because I really don't want to be here just telling you about what happened on Friday, even though Javier explicitly asked me to. But I think this was a good summary. You have a lot of news both in English and in Italian that you can look at. So I'll stop it here. What I want to say is one thing that I've already said in London and that I repeated in Rome. Extraordinary situations require extraordinary responses. This is really the message that I wanna give today. I'm not gonna give these boring kind of statements using some scientific literature reference, even though there's plenty of scientific literature on that. But what I'm gonna say is really that the world is changing. Ukraine, the Russian invasion in Ukraine is portraying a shift in the international order, a shift in the global dynamics, what I defined an international reordering. We must be united. We must act in support of Ukraine, because that's in the interest of Ukraine, but that's in the interest of Europe. And as Europeans, it is it is a must-do thing to support the Ukrainian people and Ukraine in fighting this war and in allowing them to not be attacked anymore by Russia. And with that, I really want to say supporting them in any kind of with any kind of means. Of course, the military part is very important, and we know that we've seen that with the German minister. But the civil society is also important. We need to support the recovery and the implications of this war for the civil society through collaborations with organizations, through collaboration with academia, and so on. And what I really wanna say is that we need to make clear, and I think this is the message that I wanna give today, is that there is no time for discussion right now. There is no time to make discussions on details on how things should be done. We have what we have. We have a lot of limitations within the European Union. The coalition of the willing is what would allow us to operate outside of the EU treaties, also with our non-EU partners and our non-EU allies, such as the United Kingdoms, but I'm thinking right now, but many others that are fundamental in the support of Ukraine, in supporting Ukraine. So what I'm saying is that, in my opinion, this can be an experiment to show that it is possible to have an effective security cooperation in Europe. It is possible to do that, and eventually the hope is that this is going to become something stable, and the hope is that this is going to become something stable with Ukraine within it, meaning with Ukraine that has won this war. And thanks for reminding that, Javier. So really extraordinary measures for extraordinary times. And let me use again some words that I've used already in Rome, citing Mario Draghi, former Prime Minister of Italy and President of the European Central Bank. No matter what, we must do something. We cannot just look. The world is changing and we must act. Let's do something. Let's do it together. And I'm pleased that this is happening, that this event, this initiative is happening, because the collaboration between experts, academia, think tanks, MPs, government is what we need right now to think of effective measures to be implemented in the support of Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Emanuele. Indeed, it was a very important event in Rome. It was a pleasure to be part of that event, and it is a place where we learned a lot, and we've heard many messages that will remain with us and will show us the road ahead. There is a discussion that we have very often in this period, and I'd like to start with the point that whenever there is a crisis, the first impulse of the governments is to cut the budgets on culture, on education, on arts, and on societal promotion of values. It is the first measure of governments or of parliaments who bring legislation to say, okay, now we are in crisis and we need to do something. At the London event in Westminster, when this initiative was launched, we had one presentation about the culture and arts and heritage being systematically destroyed in Ukraine in this brutal war. Before coming to this very same speaker who spoke in May in London, I'd like to invite Mr. Friso Viersum from the European Cultural Foundation, with whom we had an exciting conversation recently. And I'd like to see or to ask Mr. Viersum to remind us of the importance of culture in the context of aggression, of imperialism, of wars, as we see currently by the side of Russia against Ukraine and the hybrid war against Europe. Hello, Mr. Viersum, the floor is yours.
Hello, Javier. Hello, everybody following live in Macedonia or online. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm representing the European Cultural Foundation. That might not ring a bell with everybody yet, so allow me to shortly introduce the European Cultural Foundation, which is a long-standing foundation working to promote culture in Europe, not just for the sake of promoting culture, but because the European Cultural Foundation, by means of its statutes, wants to help grow a sense of European belonging by developing and supporting cultural initiatives that bring people together, that inspire hope, foster democracy, and imagine a shared future for Europe. We're now in our 71st year, so we celebrated an anniversary last year. Our celebrations were not too huge because we think that our mission is perhaps more urgent than it was in many of the decades behind us. And Javier, when you're talking about governments that try cutting out on culture in times of crisis or times of war. There's a very famous saying that, I don't know if it's completely true, a minister proposed to Winston Churchill in the times of the Second World War that maybe they could spend a little bit more money on the war if they will cut down their expenses on arts and culture. And it is too good to be true, so maybe it's not true at all, but it is too good a quote not to use. Then Winston Churchill apparently answered, but if we were to do so, then why are we fighting a war? And I think in that little answer lies a lot and below the surface. If we want to make Europe our home, and I think Eurobarometer opinion polls have been showing that there's a growing sense of European belonging with populations in member states. We also see that in many not member states, there is a idea of Europe that they like to belong to. And maybe that idea needs being refreshed with every generation. And then we're talking about the idea of democracy. We're talking about the idea of rule of law. We're talking about culture as a means to learn from others, to learn about yourself in order to reach out to others and build societies together, whether that be for the now or for the future. And it might be, referring to Roger's 10 points in the beginning, that this is a new era. Maybe we're not only living in a post-truth era, but we might be living in a post-law era, where a lot of the lawmaking that has built our societies over the last, let's say in Europe, post-Second World War years, has built our societies that keeps them together. And that might have been happening at a European level, but that one thing that happened with a lot of nation states when they were emerging in the 19th century, to have national musea, to have national newspapers, to have a national public space, those are things that might still be lacking in Europe. So if we are talking about the future of Europe by means of culture, it means that we will also need to develop a European public space, that will need to be thinking about a shared sense of belonging in Europe, that we need to think about safe spaces where Europeans of various backgrounds can meet, whether that be online spaces or offline spaces. And I think in all of these measures, culture, especially framed in the way how we at the European Cultural Foundation look at culture, that space where we negotiate how we want to live together, is something that is of extreme importance. The European Cultural Foundation is active in all member states of the Council of Europe, so 20 more than in the EU member states. And for us, culture is really the realm in which we can bring people, networks, initiatives together. So when we are making a strong case for culture to be higher on the strategic agenda of the European Union, and also having a little bit more money allocated to culture in the upcoming multi-financial framework, this is not because we think culture needs to be there for culture's sake. We think culture needs to be there to allow all of us to democratically discuss how we want to live together. So as part of our campaigning for a more strategic place for culture in finances and strategy of the European Union, we've also stressed that we also need a European cultural deal for Ukraine right now, to support the cultural sectors in Ukraine itself, to support cultural diaspora of Ukraine and in the rest of Europe, but also to start thinking already about the rule of law and democracy in Ukraine now and following after the war. And in our view, culture is that one realm where all things come together on how do we want to live together? What is our rule of law? What are the foundations for our society if we speak about participation, inclusion? So yeah, there is a lot at stake for culture, and looking at the bare minimum in a war that Ukraine is suffering from since 2014, there has been a lot of attacks on its cultural heritage, because as the European Commissioner for Culture, Mikalev, kept on repeating during a few of our Cultural Deal for Europe conversations. If you want to attack a nation, you attack its cultural heritage. And by Russia's war on Ukraine, it is not only a war for territory, it's a war on the minds of Ukrainians, on the rule of law in Ukraine, on Ukraine making a decision themselves to join a union that is value-driven rather than imperialist-driven. So in order to support a lot of the cultural actors in Ukraine, and we're a foundation, we also run open calls. We've been paying special attention to supporting cultural initiatives, cultural makers, cultural networks in Ukraine, and especially trying to help embed those networks in Ukrainian cultural sectors so that more people in Europe grow acquainted with the idea that Ukraine is as much Europe as is Denmark or Spain. And I think with this very long answer, I might have answered your question, Javier.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you very much, Friso. What you just said is very important in order to understand the context, the wider European context, and that the importance of culture is much higher than the government or many others might believe at the moment. And it is of utmost importance to support the culture and the cultural life both in Ukraine and in Europe as such. And I believe that this is going to be an important part of our post-event content production, including a publication with policy recommendations, and it will be definitely, deservedly, a part of the recommendations that Westminster Alliance for Ukraine and the partner organizations will make and promote across Europe and wider. In the context of culture, also in many other events and in personal communication and correspondence, we've been discussing culture and destruction of culture and heritage in Ukraine during this brutal war, but with Gudrun, Mrs. Gudrun Steinacker, who is a former ambassador to North Macedonia, but also to several other countries, including Bulgaria, and if I remember well, Russia. She's also the vice president of the Südosteuropa Gesellschaft, the Southeast European Association from Germany. And I would like to invite Ms. Gudrun Steinacker to tell us about her findings on the importance of culture and to support what we just heard from Mr. Friso Virsum. Hello, Ms. Steinacker. The floor is yours.
Hello, good evening. Thank you very much for inviting me and share my ideas with you. I would like to say that actually almost all has already been said from the previous panelists, and therefore I will be very brief, but also because I'm right now calling from the annual academic week of the Southeast Europe Association in Tutzing in Bavaria, this year with the topic of the lessons from the Yugoslav wars. I hope it will not take 30 years when the war in Bosnia finished, the open war in Bosnia finished, to have a conference on the lessons learned from the war in Ukraine. My main focus, although I fully support that culture is extremely important and the preservation of the cultural heritage in Ukraine, because they have not only the problem that a lot of cultural heritage is destroyed by concrete acts of war, but that they also, of course, lack now funds for continuing cultural activities, although some of these activities have to take now abroad. Quite a lot is taking place in Austria, the country where I actually live. And we have artists of Ukraine which are supported by the Institute for the Science of Man, it's Institut für die Wissenschaften von Menschen, and similar activities take place in various places in Austria and also, and even more, in Germany. Conferences, exhibitions, concerts, and I hope that this will also continue in the future. But I may raise also one additional issue, Javi Derala, that I'm particularly interested in that, and that is also affected by the war in Ukraine. That is nature and environment. I'm a nature protection activist, and see with great worry what the war is doing to Ukraine. And also there, a lot of support is needed. And the other organization I'm active in, besides the Southeast Europe Association, is Foundation Euronature, which is also active in Ukraine wherever it is possible to protect the unique nature in various parts of the country. Unfortunately, the areas which are occupied by Russia and annexed by Russia actually are practically not available or cannot be reached. Nevertheless, I think our support should be in all these fields. And in Vienna, I'm part of a chat group. It's called Ukraine in NATO, but it is a broad exchange of Ukrainians living in Vienna and activists, Austrian activists, who also collect money for very concrete projects to support Ukraine in the field of culture, education. We had in the Maurer Center in the very center of the city of Vienna, a wonderful exhibition with children paintings and drawings by an Ukrainian woman who is working with children in exile in Austria, but she returns regularly to Ukraine to work with these children. Painting can help to overcome the traumas of the war, or at least tackle them and live with them. And I think also these activities are very important. But for me, it is also very crucial to raise once again the issue Dr. Ressmann talked about, disinformation. I'm also in a group of activists in Austria and Germany who are fighting Russian disinformation as a very important part of the hybrid war. And today, the long-term correspondent of the German press agency in Belgrade, Dr. Thomas Brey, held a lecture in the foreign ministry in Berlin about disinformation, Russian disinformation, to be concrete, in the Balkans. It is worst, of course, in Belgrade, as you can imagine, in Serbia, but it is also taking place in all other parts of the Balkans. And I think also there, German institutions, organizations should support your countries and your journalists and media in fighting this disinformation, which in my view, this hybrid war is extremely dangerous, as was said before, and we have to do everything possible to fight it and to explain to the ordinary people, as far as you can reach them under the present circumstances. In many Balkan countries, media are not really free, and journalists cannot always reach out to all of the public. But as far as it's possible, we have to inform and to explain and to disclose all these actions of disinformation. People many ordinary people do not really understand what is going on. We are all activists and, of course, know about it, that we have to reach out to people who are anyhow confused because of all the conflicts and problems going on. And I see also what is going on now with the Gaza war, which has a huge impact, at least in Germany, a little bit less in Austria, but in many countries as well, as part of the general confusion and disinformation of a broader public. People cannot distinguish between the conflict which is going on in Ukraine, and I can say that I had a good example of that, because the day before yesterday, before coming here to that conference, I met a German journalist, and it was always not possible to explain that not only, although it is absolutely terrible what's going on in the Middle East, the conflict in Gaza is not the only one which is going on right now. And that in Ukraine, the effects of the war are very similar to that in Gaza. Perhaps not at such a very relatively small place. Ukraine is huge, but still, Russian drones are affecting towns in the very west of Ukraine, are very close to the border. People are killed, buildings are destroyed, cultural heritage is destroyed. And I think this is very important to discuss this with the broader public, that so that the war in the Ukraine is always present, and people in our countries, which are democratic, continue to fight for this democracy, for the media freedom, because it is practically destroyed in many parts of the world. The most worrisome situation, in my view, is now in the US, and I hope you will also raise what it means, the changes in the United States will mean for our fight for Ukraine against the war by Russia. So I hope I will follow the conference as much as I can. But as I said, I'm on at another conference, which I think is also very important. And I'm grateful once again for being present at this conference here by Civil. Thank you, Civil.
Thank you, Ms. Steinacker. Your presentation is indeed an illustration that all these issues are interconnected. I think that to what you said, at least in the part of disinformation, Dr. Ressmann could add a couple of words on what you said about the disinformation. Please, Dr. Ressmann, could you comment shortly, and then we will go to the next speakers in our conference.
Yeah, thank you, Xavier Derella. 2 sentences. When you have, we were in Ukraine in 2023 during the war, and we make a short film with the students of Tarashenko University. It's called Mass Graves, where we made a film about the destruction Russia did. And when they say that they only bombing military connected things in Ukraine, it's a complete lie. This is propaganda from the brutalest propaganda. We saw bombed cultural centers. We saw so to say, face to face, how they bombed living big houses in the middle. Some parts in the middle are away, bombed away, and people are still living there. They try to destroy Ukrainian culture. all things what Ukrainian culture means is an enemy in view of Russia. From Putin, Russia's view, there is no culture of Ukraine existing. There is no own original thing coming from Ukraine. They really want to destroy not only the country, they want to destroy the consciousness of the people and the collective consciousness of their own culture. This is one of the points what makes this war so absolutely cruel and based on unbelievable lies in propaganda, telling there is no own original Ukrainian culture. There is even the Ukrainian language is also no own language. It's very narrow to Russia. It's only a dialect. They want to say Ukraine and Ukrainian people as Ukrainian never exist. And this is the thing I feel absolutely remember to things happening in Germany in the last century under the Hitler fascist regime. And
Thank you very much.
Means Balkan knows also very well.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ressmann. I think that this conversation is indeed going very naturally towards the direction of Dr. Walter Quattrocchiocchi, who we had the pleasure to contact the other day. And we are here presenting our findings, but also presenting our recommendations. And Quattrocchiocchi has a very, very interesting and extremely important work already done, and he's already still doing that. He's scientifically researching and analyzing disinformation, propaganda narratives, and other forms of the hybrid operations in Europe. Indeed, the hybrid warfare is is conducted on various fronts. It very often arrives, not very often, it arrives all the time on the top of our palms or in our living rooms on the screens, and it is there silently entering our minds and our thoughts and changing the behavior of people. But here's Walter, who can tell us more about his findings, about his research and work within his institute. Walter, the floor is yours. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much, Xavier. Thank you for being here and for the invitation. I will try to be brief and a little bit provocative in the case, especially because when I'm listening about misinformation and participating in this conference, it looks like we are always in 2017. So nothing changed after years, in a sense that we are always saying, basically, we are looking at the scenario in which we are looking at a fight between fake news and real news, while the scientific perspective is pretty much more complex and, I would say, dominant in this issue. It was pretty nice. I mean, historically speaking, I was I was in the advisory of the European Commission during the the beginning of fake news, no? So at the very beginning, in 2016. And I left the collaboration because they were basically following the journalistic approach to the disinformation. They failed. In May 2024, it was nice. It was very nice for us. The Ursula von der Leyen said, "Oh, nice. Pre-banking is pretty much more effective than debunking and fact-checking." See, it was in her speech, and it was nice because pre-banking came from our studies that was funded by the UK government. during the IRIS Research Coalition. I was one of the PI, of the principal investigator of this massive research project involving Cambridge University, Harvard, Sapienza. And basically, we were building a pipeline in which we were analyzing the problem and then providing hints to users to avoid threats. That's the way, not going to people saying this is true and this is false. Basically, this is basically competition among narratives. And on this perspective, what I saw is that for 7 years, 8 years, there was a huge gap between the scientific evidence and what the policymaking were doing on the front on the scientific, scientifically speaking. Now things are a little bit changed. I mean, I'm involved in some of the European panel for the democracy shield, let's say. And actually, the frame is more scientifically driven. How we can approach this problem in a way that we can be, I mean, we are in a geopolitical phase in which we have to wake up. Otherwise, things are gonna be messy, on my perspective. On one side, we have the opportunity, because it's an opportunity to have Trump on the other side of the ocean, because we can wake up and then decide a little bit what we can do and what we can drive in this direction. And I would say that the scientific advisory for the policymaking is one of the main pillars. You know that tomorrow is going to be published one of the trials on artificial intelligence, that China is moving pretty much far than we did with the AI Act. So we are not competing neither on the technological level, neither on the normative side. So there is something that we are missing always the point. And in this scientific perspective, I mean, the idea of seeing still people saying, oh, we are fighting against the Russian propaganda. Of course, there is the Russian propaganda, but if we don't go to the roots of this phenomenon, we are basically running in circle. And what are the roots? What the phenomenon really simply is information overload, that is information overload for social media platform, from social media platform. There is the business model of the social media platform that is pricing entertainment and engagement. The combination of both create a mutual synthesis. It is a feedback loop in which more content, more feedback, more content, more feedback, and the result for our cognitive system is the tendency to seek for the information we like and avoid the information we don't. The result of this is polarization. And I'm saying this since 2016. If you go on PNIS, there is a paper, The Spreading of Misinformation Online, 3,000 citations at the moment, is the paper setting this, that now is the narrative for the European Commission. Finally, we got it. If we want to fight this, we have to make people aware of the process itself. We tend to polarize, and we have to be aware that it is the business model of the social media platform pricing this polarization. And the result of this polarization is not that people are more easily trusting in the Russian propaganda. The very effect is that we are eroding trust in our own institutions. That's the issue. And we have to work in that direction. Not still fighting, because even approaching the problem by saying we are good and they are evil is exactly the creation of polarization.
That's right.
And that, to my point, is that we have to be more, to exploit this situation, to be more scientifically oriented and create a good, let's say, deal between science and politics, especially in this moment that it is really needed, especially for the phenomenological level. Now consider what is going to happen next when we have the infodemics, no? So overabundance of information that is driven by entertainment social media platform, to the level of induced by the large language models. What are the problems of large language models? Don't trust to all this bullshit mumbo jumbo about the general artificial intelligence, the minds. That's all just bullshit for marketing. No, the real point in the AI, large language model, is that we are eroding trust even in the facts. So people tend to exchange, to mess up the way, the shape, the way things is written, and the content. So the reliability of content is mistaken by statistical linguistic priors. We call this epistemia, that is the disease of the epistemic level. So we are totally losing the grip on what is going to be true or not, because this business model is overloading information everywhere. And this is going to be, to me, a very huge problem, because we tend to delegate blindly tasks to large language models, but when we receive the output, we are not able to see if it is true or not, if we are not enough aware on that. I'm seeing a lot of philosophers now presenting discussion about large language models, transformers, mathematics, everything driven by large language model. The problem is that most of the things are wrong. How we can fight at epistemic level and opinions forming and democracy in this environment we are gonna see in the is already here at the moment, and it's gonna be worse.
Thank you very much for these provocative thoughts that you shared with us. Of course, there is a lot of food for thought here, and I believe that it will be noticed by those that create policies and practices in the future. Indeed, it was important to hear from you and to learn a little bit of your research and thinking. Next, I would like to speak to Heather Roberson Gaston. She's coming from the United States, and she's currently in London, but working for the Virginia University in the States, and also a human rights expert. In that context, I would like to ask Heather, what should be the human rights agenda of Ukraine once the war is over? What's the human rights agenda, according to you, for Ukraine and therefore for Europe and beyond? And hello, Heather. Great to be with you here. Just for the audience and for the other contributors to this great event. Heather is one more of the authors of this book, Defending Democracy and Human Rights, that has been published in March this year, just before the launch of the Westminster Alliance for Ukraine. The other three authors are here at this table. Heather, we miss you here, but of course we will have to be satisfied with you online with us at this event. The floor is yours, Heather.
Okay, thank you so much for having me, Javier, Dr. Ressmann, Roger, all of you. It's nice to see some familiar faces from that conference, and I have to say that the things that I heard in December, the conference out of which this book grew, that Javier just pointed to, I think of. I think of every day. These are the things we need to be, broadcasting to the rest of the world, the recommendations about defending democracy and human rights amid this kind of rising tide of authoritarianism and unfreedom. But I'm happy. Oh, but I think I said, I'm so sorry I'm not there. Because I really, truly am. Everybody knows that Skopje is my favorite place to be, and you're all my favorite people to be with. So I'm quite bummed. But I'm happy that I'm going later in this group because, as I've been listening, I've been deleting, because I don't have to tell anybody that the question of, what will we do about the human rights situation in Ukraine? How will we rebuild things there after the war is over, when we don't know when it will be over, we don't know what the ceasefire will even look like. I don't have to tell you that it's not a premature question to be asking. It's a question that we really we do have to be asking now, because on the one for one reason is that we do know in these situations of peacekeeping and post-conflict reconstruction, all of which includes a very important human rights component, we do tend to know in advance a lot of what we will need. And in Ukraine, a lot of it is obvious now. I'm sure I'll miss something, but of course, we know we will need to rebuild housing and infrastructure, obviously. And we know that there are abuses that can occur when that happens, abuses against workers, abuses against those who are trying to access the housing and other kinds of services that they need. We know there are over 1 million war veterans, that many of them are suffering from severe mental and physical trauma. We know there are tens of thousands of soldiers and civilians who have lost limbs. The media sector, we all know, has been relentlessly targeted and is going to need so much assistance. I could just keep going because it's so immense, but I think, and we all know this, so I'm kind of, preaching to the choir, but I think we also all know that the task ahead of us in Ukraine, it isn't too immense, because but let me see if I can say this a better way. I think we know that it's not too immense for us to tackle, but we're probably all connected to people who don't know that and who look at Ukraine and are like, oh my God, this is too overwhelming. This is too expensive and immense, and I just want to turn it off. And so I think about what we can say to people like that. And it's that, yes, the task of rebuilding the human rights situation in Ukraine is immense. It's full of challenges. But the reason we know it's full of challenges and we know what they are is because there are people already working on those challenges. Many of them are here on this, in this Zoom call, and are sitting in the audience in Skopje right now, are people who are working on the challenges to human rights in Ukraine right now, are ready to go, and so we can assure people of that we have the knowledge, we have the expertise, and I don't I don't like to say this, I'm more of a peacenik, but we do have, there's no lack of weaponry and people in the world who can be trained as part of, forming a credible military component that we also need to provide security and safety for the people who do the work of rebuilding Ukraine, and for all the people who, who just need to be able to live. So, okay, if we have all of this, we have the knowledge, the expertise, and the capacity to back it up, or can have the capacity to back it up. We know what is missing, and that is political will. And it's just how these things work, is that the feet drag. And that is something that all of us, even the people who feel really overwhelmed, like the people that we talk to, hopefully we're all out there talking to people about Ukraine and about the threats to freedom and democracy that are posed by this the aggression in Ukraine, that there are solutions, that we do have the capacity, and we can reassure people, but we need the political will. We need people to believe, this, we can really accomplish something here. And not only can we accomplish what needs to be accomplished here, but we have to. And I guess that is probably what makes this mission that we will all face in Ukraine. That's what will make it different. It will make it different from everything that's come before. And I know that this doesn't apply to everybody here. I'm speaking as an American. When I look at the peacekeeping missions I've studied, all of the peacekeepers and human rights activists and conflict resolutionists and all of these people who have come to the Balkans to rebuild rule of law systems, all of this kind of stuff. It's always we think that we're kind of bringing our way of life, and it's like, here, look, this is how we do things. This is our special way. It's just who we are. We're democratic people who enjoy freedom, and we're going to show that to you as well, and help you. And that's just not the situation here. The situation here is almost everyone has been staring down the abyss of unfreedom for like, the last decade. It's gotten worse and worse and worse. And so the motivation is really different. It's not charity. It's not just, foreign aid. It's not something that we do for others that is, taking away from priorities at home. And I think that has to be part of the message, because people will say, oh, but, what about our healthcare system? What about the services that people here need? And we need to be able to say people with assuredness, and I feel that I can say this to Americans, which is that if we don't confront what is happening in Ukraine, and if we don't take a stand and meet that challenge, there is no home. There's nothing there's nothing there, because we're all under threat, and we've all seen enough at this point that we should know that we aren't just like naturally democratic people who can just count on that as part of our lives. And, I always feel like apologizing to my colleagues in Macedonia, because you've been telling me this for years, to not take it for granted.
Thank you.
And yes, thank you.
Thank you, Heather. You pointed out quite an ambitious agenda. However, the human rights agenda, neither in Europe nor in Ukraine, is a luxury. It's a necessity. We don't have the luxury to say we cannot fulfill the human rights agenda. We cannot fulfill the democracy agenda, because that time has passed. We don't have neither the time nor the luxury not to be involved entirely in democracy and human rights. And the points that you made are extremely important, and it is also important to understand that we need to take the whole agenda and implement it entirely, without exception and without excuses. In the last 10 months, I've heard quite a few points from our next speaker, but I'd like to point out two. At the launch event in Westminster, London, in May, we've heard the expression, we should not support Ukraine to survive. We must support Ukraine to win. And the other point was made in Rome the other day at the high-level event in Rome, organized by Centro, Studi, Internazionali, and it was about the trauma that the Ukrainian nation, the Ukrainian citizens, the Ukrainian soldiers, fighters, have gone through and still are going through, and that it is a huge challenge for the Ukrainian nation, but also for Europe and for the world. And we need to think about that, and we need to take action about it. And those 2 points were made by Professor Olivier Védrine of the Jean Monnet Association, one more partner organization that is supporting the Westminster Alliance for Ukraine program. Actually, it's part of its network. Olivier, thank you very much for being with us and for waiting your order to come patiently. I would like to hear your take on today's conference, on today's topic, about the shared future of both Ukraine and Europe. Could you tell us what is your take on that?
Thank you for your invitation, and I'm happy to be with you and with all those speakers. I have a few points. First of all, the subject was defending democracy, the battlefield of truth. I think if we have to underline one word, is truth. I spent 10 years in Ukraine. As you know, I was during 3 months on Maidan, very active. I spoke several times on the stage. And during this time, I was political advisor of one president of the EU institutions about Ukraine. And I agree with what lots of persons said. Last week, I spoke about this post-trauma syndrome, which is huge in Ukraine, among civilians and among soldiers. But if we want to win this war, we must not take the same, can say, tools of propaganda than Putin. Defending democracy is defending the truth. As you know, I am also a journalist, and I had my own TV show in Ukraine, in three TV channels, national TV channels. And I started in 2015. And one of my target is the fact, only the fact. And I didn't want to do propaganda online. This is the way of thinking of Russian propaganda, but us, the European and the representative of Western democracy, we have to say the truth and the fact, only the fact. Who is lying? It's Russia. Who attacked Ukraine? It is Russia. Then we have to be very clear. We know that democracy is the best system we found in the history of humanity. We don't have to excuse, we don't have to lie to defend democracy. We have to say the truth. Human right, freedom, freedom of speech, development, social care, European value based on fundamental right, diversity, united in diversity. This is the anthem of the European Union. We have all the weapons to fight and to win against totalitarianism. And we are not doing, I think, in the right way, because we are not offensive as we must be. If we want to support Ukraine, we have to send weapons, we have to send soldiers on the ground, we have to send and to help for reconstructions. We have also to help for reconstruction of people with post-trauma syndrome. That will be a huge program. But at first, we have to show that us, the democracy of the Western world, we are the only system that can provide happiness to the people. We are the people. This is in the US constitutions, and this is also in our French constitution. The people. Then the people of Ukraine deserve democracy. That's it. And us, the European world and the US and Canada, Western world, I am a little bit afraid now about Trump, but anyway, we have to support Ukraine because Ukraine deserves it. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivier, indeed, for these clear and resounding thoughts that you share with us. And thank you for the piece of information about your engagement, ongoing engagement in Ukraine and in the Ukrainian media space. We closely follow what you are doing both as a Jean Monnet Association, but also as a thought leader and as a public person. Thank you very much for that. I'd like to move to Egle Selesiene, Lithuanian College of Democracy, and we certainly have been in contact in the past 10 months on various levels and on topics that are related to democracy, human rights, and Ukraine. Good evening, Egle. Thank you very much for being with us. Could you share your thoughts with us tonight within the Ukraine and Europe future, our common reality? What are the lessons that we have learned, and what do we need to do in 5 minutes, please? If you can. Of course, it's impossible to express all of our thoughts and our experience, to share the experience in only a few minutes, but certainly it is worth making an outline, which is later going to be part of our further communication and work together towards the issues that we are trying to overcome. The floor is yours, Egle. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much for invitation. I'm pleased to be here, and thank you for bringing such as excellent people to talk about main values, what is important for all of us. And I would like to begin with my personal view. So 30 years ago, the Soviet Union collapsed and my country, Lithuania, became independent again. And many countries across Central and Eastern Europe joined European family. And it was time of hope and beginnings, and I believed, and we believed, that democracy would stay strong and would last forever. However, today, in this conference, we talked about our democracies, and our democracies are in danger. Today, as many of you already mentioned it, Europe faces new kinds of threat: disinformation, cyber attacks, provocation. European Commissioner Audrius Kubilius said that we're not at war, but we're not at peace either. And this situation may stay with us for a long time. It's not a one moment. So that's why defense is very important. And today defense means resilience, keeping our society informed, confident, and united. If we want peace, what we talk here in Lithuania a lot with our politicians, with our civic society, we must prepare for defense. And I'm really appreciate that today was highlighted 3 main things of democracy: free institution, free media, free people. And then one of these is weakened, democracy suffers. So civic society organization, NGOs, journalists, young leaders is our heart of our democracy. And then government, head state, civic society continues to act to protect, to remind us of our values. But today, many NGOs are under pressure. Many journalists are under pressure. And few examples were presented in previous speeches as well. If we lose our civic space, we lose democracy. Defense is not about tanks or weapons, but it's also, it was told already, it's about the trust. So what I want to highlight one more time, that Ukraine is fighting for its freedom and in the same time for ours. This war is not only about the territory, it's about the future of democracy. Every day, Ukrainians show that freedom can survive aggression, and Ukrainians' courage reminds us that democracy is not something given, it is something chosen and defended. So shortly, I would like there is many things what I would like to share, but having in mind that there is other speeches as well, so I would like to stop here and just to thank you all that you invited me and that I had a chance to speak with you today.
Great. Thank you very much for your focused presentation, and I would like to warmly invite you in the name of my colleagues here and in the name of Civil and the Civil Media platform to continue our communication, and please send us your thoughts. We will be very glad to publish them, and also to be part of our Eyes on Democracy podcast that I'm having the honor and pleasure to conduct, to produce with Mr. Casale here. And of course, this is not only an invitation for you, but also for all the others here tonight with us. I'd like to next ask Mr. Michael Clayforth Carr, consultant to the airspace, defense and security sector, and advisor to the United Kingdom government, to share his thoughts about Europe's and Ukraine's future, and what are the lessons learned and possibly the next steps, especially in this very, very important sector in which he's working and building his expertise. Thank you very much for being with us, Mr. Clayforth Carr, and please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, everyone. It's been really interesting so far, and I wanted to focus on the industrial perspective, if I can, just to set the scene, and then to talk a little bit about defense industrial capacity, innovation and learning from Ukraine, economic and political sustainability, and the implications for the coalition. I think we've started off with what you might call an emergency response to supporting Ukraine, and I think now that's changed. So we've been looking at how we can help them militarily, how we can build fighting capability, both defensive and offensive, and I think now we're moving into talking about reconstruction, economic growth post-conflict. But how do we do that, and what are we doing in the meantime? And I think the other element that's come out is we maybe started off helping Ukraine, and they needed our help. But I think actually we need their help as much as they needed us. And the reason for that is that I think Russia needs to realize that we are credible and capable. We have a lot of capability, but I think the one thing that's really been apparent in this conflict is understanding what's worked, which is quite different from what we assumed would work militarily. And the Ukrainian conflict and the Ukrainians have shown us that in spades, just how different it is to what we imagined. I think there's an element which I think has run through a lot of the speakers today, this idea of a narrative, a language, an ambition. And I think that there's a lot of things that we say politically, and they mean something to us politically, and it's important to have the political support and will. But it's how do you then turn that into something, something tangible? I think the thing that's happened is, and over the years really, is we've seen the budget increasing because of the US influence. We've seen budget increasing in all of the countries and a commitment to spend more. But that spend hasn't happened. It hasn't happened. It may be helping support and buy equipment and so on for Ukraine. But within the countries, we need to look more powerful, more capable, more credible than we've ever looked. And I think the other thing that has surprised me is the way in which we can no longer rely, as we used to, on US support. We will still need that, but I think one of the implications is we absolutely need to be more in control of our own destiny. But we still have a reliance on the US, and that will probably continue in some way. But I think the Ukrainians have shown us what works, and I think the lack of support that we had anticipated, although maybe it was flagged before Trump came into power, we perhaps shouldn't have expected all of that. It has raised the stakes, if you like. And I think when you then move on to the defense industrial capacity, I think we're moving more to a phase where we're focused as much on industrial output as we are on political will. I think all the words, all the sentiments are real, they're sincere, and they're evident. But we've got to look at how we increase our industrial output, not only to support the Ukrainians, but actually for our own benefit. And I know from the UK how important that is. I think, in terms of ammunition, drones, air defense systems, repair capacities, etc. And I think we're now looking at how we can support the Ukrainians more effectively and militarily for what the current conflict is, but also how these public-private collaborations are becoming more essential to look at long-term support for Ukraine beyond the current conflict, and then moving into ability to export and rebuild the country economically. I think the one element and by the way, there's a lot that we're doing from a UK perspective in terms of trade associations leading missions into Ukraine. The Department of Trade is putting manuals together to help people understand how to do business in Ukraine. They're also looking for inward investment from venture capitalists and PE. But interestingly, as an example of what the Russians will do, they're setting up front venture capital companies which look as though they're investing in Ukraine, but actually what they really want is to suck the innovation out and understand what's going on. So we've got to be really conscious about how things are played out from the Russian point of view. I think the other element is we need time. Not that I'm advocating wanting to keep conflicts going any longer than we have to, but the longer that we can enable Ukraine to push back on Russia, the more time we have to, and we need to move more rapidly, by the way, to build up our own capability and credibility. And I think when you look at the numbers of us, there's 28, 30 of us in countries that have to make a decision. There's one person makes a decision in Russia. And I think that's an issue that we need to show that we can make decisions quickly, effectively, and we can move in a very agile way. I think one of the most important lessons, though, is the innovation and learning from Ukraine. They really have identified and continue to identify ways in which they can evolve, and it is a war fighting mentality which we don't have. And I think the point has been made through these various talks this afternoon about we understand what the threats are, we understand what needs to be done, but the wider public in our respective countries don't quite see that way. If anything, they maybe feel things aren't quite working, things aren't quite going Ukraine's way, it's inevitable, they'll have to capitulate, etc., etc. So these are things that we need to counter, and we need to counter them not just with words, because they hear a lot of words. We need to counter them with evidence and examples of success and progress. And I think keeping your population motivated in a hostile environment is a fundamental of all the wars. And I think there's a twin track approach here, which is helping Ukraine, but helping Ukraine to also help us, because we need to move forward together. And I think the talking to Ukrainians, certainly in the embassy in London, beyond this conflict, we want to be able to leverage the partnerships that we've created to actually enable them to build an export capability. In the Strategic Defence Review in the UK, we have specifically identified the way in which the innovation coming out of Ukraine needs to be embodied in our own strategic defence plans. So I think the challenge for the coalition, I think, is to maintain that political support. But I think we need to pay attention to the language, the intent, the resolve that we have, and our ability to make decisions and stick to them, rather than just be seen to be talking about things. And I think it's how that then translates into positive action. And we need the time to build up our own capabilities. And some countries are doing this faster and more than others, but it's something that we really do need to show that we actually are increasingly powerful and less attractive for Russia to take on. And when we provide support to Ukraine, it's serious and it's credible, and it's not just a bunch of Europeans talking about it. So I think that we also need to make sure we've got this popular support, and to compensate for what we are going to see perhaps is either an unpredictable or a lower level of support than we would traditionally have expected from, say, the USA. So I'll probably stop there in the interest of time, and maybe I've said a few things there that are perhaps not so palatable, but happy to expand on that if you would like.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clifford Carr. Actually, you've made several points that have to be repeated more frequently, and we've been long waiting for being heard that actually Ukraine has taught us a lesson, a number of lessons, all the way since the Maidan revolution, and especially from the first hours of the brutal invasion 3 years ago by its Russian superpower dictatorship regime. Thank you very much indeed, and certainly will remain in contact with you and your knowledge, because it's crucial to understand the dynamics of the European and Ukrainian future. Now I'd like to invite Katerina Pavlova from CRISP Berlin, who is right now in Kiev, if she's still with us. No.
She is not.
Okay, she will hopefully join us again. But in the meantime, we have one more distinguished speaker that I'm very honored to have welcomed, and to also thank him for his patience being with us from the beginning of this conference, Mr. István Hegedűs, former Hungarian MP, member of the parliament, but also nowadays a prominent thought leader and a societal actor in the Hungarian society and wider. Good evening, Mr. Hegedűs. Thank you for being with us. What would you say about the European and Ukrainian joint future? Did we learn the lessons, or we still need to learn? And what should be our next step? You coming from a very interesting country, to say the least, would be great to hear from about your thoughts. I see that Katya is rejoining us, but she unfortunately lost her order for the time being. I'd like to give the floor now to Mr. Hegedűs. Here you are.
Thank you very much, Shabir, and thanks for the invitation to you and, of course, Roger, who suggested me to be invited. And I'm sorry, Katya, that I am first now and you only follow me. And yes, of course, I will talk a little bit about Hungary, because as you, Shabir, mentioned, interesting is the last word we might use about today's Hungary. But first, let me express my great attitude as a Hungarian and European. Also, I would like to express my solidarity with Ukraine. And as many of you already emphasized, that Ukrainians are fighting for their freedom and their independence, but actually not just for themselves, but for Europe, and maybe we can say for the globe. And I think we should support this struggle and fight full-heartedly. Actually, this struggle already reminds me of our own revolution, the Hungarian uprising in 1956, when a former generation, I was born after that, fought for freedom and independence, and finally this revolution was brutally oppressed by Soviet tanks. So we should remember this historic facts, and we can only hope, and I hope very much, that this time we have a chance to win over more or less the same evil as previous generations fought against the communist regimes, Stalinism, and so on. Now, my second point is what you have already mentioned, Shabir, is the special case of Hungary, because contradicting to our national history and also our shared mythology, the Hungarian government has developed a hostile attitude towards against Ukraine. I have to emphasize here that this is the government, not our nation, which has created this climate in Hungary, and it expresses this hostile attitude also at European level. Or Viktor Orban, our prime minister, expresses his views at the European Council and all over in Europe, giving interviews, attacking Ukraine, and so on. He tries to block Ukraine's future accession to the European Union. And I might say only because of selfish reasons, because of economic chauvinism. And of course, he has a domestic strategic calculation, which means that creates enemies. He has created of the people in order to mobilize his own political camp. And we are facing national general elections next year, and this is an instrument for him to win support in domestic politics. On the other hand, his anti-Ukrainian rhetoric goes hand in hand with an anti-European narrative. Both are based on accusations and fake news, often using Russian narrative or just creating his or his government's own rhetoric, maybe not going so far calling Zelensky a Nazi, because that would be too much for the Hungarian public, but using a language against Zelensky and the Ukrainians, which is very similar to Russian propaganda. Actually, this sort of accusation also serves Orban's own geopolitical dreams about a non-liberal world order or maybe disorder. In the pro-governmental media, which actually dominates the national public sphere, according to a loyal historian and advisor to Orban, even the massacre in Bucha cannot be proven, or even worse, it was the product of the Ukrainian military, not the Russian army. President Zelensky himself is portrayed as an arrogant, stupid guy who blackmails the European Union, whilst his country is not sovereign at all and has already lost the war. So actually the pro-governmental media and Orban himself go very far, and so on. Orban often stands alone in Europe with his troublemaking political line, which is based on, he would call it realism, but I would call it false realism and cynicism. And I hope that he will remain isolated in the future, or even better, perhaps, he might be defeated at the parliamentarian elections next year in Hungary. Now, finally, because we are running out of time, I think, so I don't want to talk too much, we have heard already about Belarus, Georgia, and other countries. And now I have talked about the Hungarian case, but especially because it can be useful for North Macedonians to study and learn about democratic backsliding within the European Union. But Hungary is not a unique case, a special case anymore. Authoritarianism and illiberal populism have spread over in the whole world. Unfortunately, illiberal populist political parties and their leaders play more and more significant role, and their influence is growing in the international arena. We should not allow them to set the agenda. Liberals and Democrats have to fight back with determination at national, European, and global levels, here at home in Hungary, or on the Balkans, and even in the United States, as it was already mentioned. we have to follow the fascinating example of the Ukrainian people. Ukraine should win, and so should liberal democracy win worldwide as well. Thanks for your invitation and your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hegedus. I very much appreciate everything you've said, and especially the point you made about the next elections. Hopefully, your predictions will come true. However, the last but not the least, from the online speakers and contributors, participants to this conference is Katerina Pavlova from CRISP Berlin, who is currently in Kiev and who is an expert in disinformation and propaganda. He's also an author of a book about these issues and who has been with us on several occasions regarding these topics. Hello, Katya. I hope that you didn't wait for too long, because these discussions that we've heard, at least to me, were extremely important and very interesting indeed. But let's hear from you. What is your take of what you heard so far? What's the future of Europe and Ukraine together?
Thank you very much, Javier, for the invitation. I'm sorry for being impatient. I'm home, and in Kyiv it gets complicated at some point of time. So, yeah, I'm now in a transition from my function as a member of the German civil society to a member of the Ukrainian government. I'm going to the Ministry of Unity. That's why so I'm moving to Kyiv, and I would like to first of all speak about the unity. So I think this is the main weapon that we can take against the invader. As long as we are united, we can be strong. And this is, I would say, the lesson number one from Ukraine, that since this society, this nation is united, we can actually continue fighting. And Russia is really examining very precisely what are the divisions in the Ukrainian system between those who stayed in the country and those who had to flee. And they are really penetrating the digital space and making this myth sound like it's bigger than it actually is. So that many people living abroad think that they are not welcome here, which is think they could not actually reintegrate here, or that many of those who have been living abroad for a long time, even before the full-scale invasion, that they think the country has not made any steps forward in fighting corruption, which is definitely not true. Like, sure, there is still corruption in Ukraine, but the country, even under the state of war, is continuing its process in combating corruption. So yeah, unity, I think, is number one lesson learned from Ukraine, and I think it also goes for Europe and the whole the world. As long as we say that, yes, we still stay united for fighting for democracy, we can continue fighting. My second lesson learned is the role of civil society. We all know that it has played a crucial role in defending Ukraine, because so many of those who have been the active civil society members took the weapon and went to protect the motherland. And I think that as it is hostile to you, it was that hostile to them too, that instead of standing for the nonviolent resistance on Maidan, and we've been doing it, every generation in Ukraine has done it. It was the Revolution of Granite in 1990, then 2004, then 2013. So we've trained this nonviolent resistance from generation to generation. And then all of a sudden, you have to learn to actually take the weapon in your hand and go against your principles. And I wish it never happened, but it did. So yeah, I would say training the civil society and not getting out of the how should I say, being used to standing out for your freedom, even when it is dangerous. I would say that's a lesson learned for Ukraine and also for the world. You also see how also in Ukraine it became a bit complicated when there was a law in Ukraine, even signed by the president of Ukraine, to shut down the anti-corruption institutions. And then what happened? The civil society is going on the streets. And yes, I know it is dangerous to go on the streets in Belarus. I know it is dangerous to go on the streets in Russia, but it is at least as dangerous in Ukraine. But not because our government will shut us down, but because the Russian government will shell us. And I think that we need to just weight this up, and understand. Yes, it is dangerous, but what is the alternative? The alternative is an occupation, or the alternative is the regime under which no discussion is possible, under which no freedom of choice is possible. So that's my number two, the civil society. And the third, I would say, the international solidarity. And I think that there are different capacities at different times to show the international solidarity. When you are too busy with surviving, maybe you're not the best at showing solidarity. That's why I would say that Ukraine expects way more solidarity from, for example, Germany, because it looks very stable to us, than we would expect from a bit from the countries which go through the struggle themselves. But I see a lot of solidarity from North Macedonia, despite how complicated it is. So I just wish that it continues being like that, that we, even if we are too busy with our internal struggle, that we also support those who are on the front. For me, that means, first of all, supporting the Ukrainian army, but that's what I can do. And I hope some of you can also do that by donations or whichever help. And another thing that I think is really important is keeping talking to the people who do not support Ukraine and who do not support democracy. It is very annoying, but Christmas is approaching. You will definitely meet some of the people who are not that pro-democratic, so you will find some work to do. There is no vacation for all of us, I think. Thank you, and greetings from Kyiv.
Thank you very much, Katya. Indeed, please stay safe there in Kyiv. And in a comment to what you said, fighting for democracy is dangerous, but submitting to tyrants and aggressors is deadly. Therefore, we are here with you. Please stay with us. Stay with Europe, you and Ukraine as a whole. Ukrainian nation showed us what fighting for freedom and democracy means. And you all, ladies and gentlemen, that are online with us for about 2 hours now in this conference, I would like to ask you for a few more minutes of your patience. And of course, the same counts for our online audience and the audience here in this conference room. I'd like to invite my friends and colleagues and the partners of Civil to say a few words. And here's Roger to give us a vote of thanks and possibly to summarize.
Thank you, Sabir. I'm going to close the conference now, and it won't be a few minutes, it'll be 2 minutes, and thank you so much, Sabir. Let me take 2 minutes just to give a vote of thanks. I've been really inspired by everything that everyone has said this evening, and perhaps it was particularly fitting that we close with Katya Pavlova walking courageously through the streets of Kyiv without fear in her heart, because fear is exactly what Vladimir Putin wants to put into the middle of our lives, the center of our lives, whether in Ukraine or in the rest of Europe. And that is why it is so important that we all become defenders of democracy, not just the governments, not just the MPs, but all of us as citizens. And I'm a citizen now, but 20 years ago I was an MP. When I was an MP, we used to talk about promoting democracy and human rights. And I think it's a sign of the time that today we're talking about defending democracy and human rights. And we've been reminded again and again this evening, we are not yet in a position in Europe to be able to defend our democracy and our human rights, and that needs to change. The world is changing very rapidly around us, and we need to respond to that. We need to act. We need to, and that is what we're trying to do with Westminster Alliance for Ukraine, and with all of your help, with the remarkable speakers that we've heard from this evening, and from all of you here in Skopje, Macedonia, in the room, and all of you working online, from speakers from a range of countries and a range of sectors. And we've been reminded as well that we must stand together and we must cooperate and learn from each other. And again, I've learned so much this evening. I've not just been inspired, I've learned so much, and I think we will be looking to produce a second publication that perhaps captures some of the information we've heard tonight. We were only able to give very short time to each of our speakers, but we will be following up with more in-depth interviews with them, which will all be available on the defendingdemocracy.global website. Please go to defendingdemocracy.global, have a look there, have a look at the particular section on Westminster Alliance for Ukraine. You can download a copy of our book, Defending Democracy and Human Rights, and you can also see our podcast there, Eyes on Democracy. So it just remains, Sabir, for me to thank on behalf of Dr. Ressmann and myself of Media Dialogue, New European People's Forum, the other partners of Defending Democracy.global of Seville, to thank you, Sabir, for your commitment, for your hard work, and for your inspirational leadership, and that of your team here in Skopje, Macedonia. North Macedonia, of course, on the front line of the hybrid war. You experience these attacks every day. You experience these cyber attacks on your organization, on your website every day. Indeed. And that's because you're doing such a brilliant job in standing up to the power of Vladimir Putin, and we stand with you. And your impact and your influence, if I may say so, to you and to your team goes well beyond the borders of North Macedonia. It has a European reach, as we saw this evening. It reaches from London to Kiev and to the United States as well, and everywhere in between. We stand with you today. We stand with you going forward. We stand with you in defending democracy and human rights. And once again, my thanks to all our speakers, to you and your team, Shabir, to everyone here in the room in Skopje, North Macedonia, and thank you and good night to all of you watching, wherever you may be around the world. Let us not have fear in our hearts. Let us be like Katya Pavlova walking tonight through the streets of Kyiv with courage in our hearts, with hope for the future, and with a determination to work together to get to the position where we really can, in a practical way and not just aspirationally, defend our democracy and our human rights. Thank you very much and good night from Skopje, North Macedonia.
Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Okay. Good night. Take care.